Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic, better late than never. Today's story is that of Rachel Moran. Grab yourselves a gin and let's go. Sin and Tonic! New vessel. I'm not sure if I've used this before for gin. I love it. But it's ginger beer. Ginger beer with gin. It's something else. Really good. Now, I'm just going to go with it and I'm just going to film, but it's bonfire night here. So there are fireworks going off and it is prime time firework time now. We will do our best. Just think of it as hearing the woohoo celebrations of other people. We're not partaking this year. A bit miserable, but I just didn't plan anything this time. I'm really busy. We will enjoy everyone else's fireworks when I finish. We'll stand in the garden in the freezing cold and watch them. At least it's not raining. Also, I noticed that I haven't put a lip on and I feel a bit naked without a lip. But I'm all set up and raring to go, so I'm not going back to do a lip. And I put the coals on in the sauna, so I'm nice and cozy. Right, let's begin. Rachel Moran was 21 years old at the time of our story. She was born on the 17th of January in 1987. She lived in Hull in East Yorkshire. Yorkshire. No, that's not Yorkshire. Why am I doing country bumpkin? I literally can't think of a Yorkshire accent at all. It's gone out of my head. Up north. That's it. So she lived up north. Her mum and dad were Ray and Wanda Moran, and Rachel was one of 4 siblings, and she was a bit younger than all of the others. I think her brother was 6 when she was born, but her other 2 siblings were older, so she was quite a lot younger than her older 2 siblings. Rachel was a very good girl. She did very well at school. When she left school, she went to Hull College, and get this right, she did a course in cabaret. That sounds amazing. What? I'd like to do a course in cabaret. You live and learn, don't you? Because I didn't even know that was a thing that existed. How cool is that? Get to Hull and do cabaret. Thank you. Cabaret would not be her career path. She took a job decorating cakes, and then that wasn't really what she wanted to do. She wanted to be a chef. That was her goal, her dream. On the cabaret course, I forgot to mention, apologies, she met somebody called Mark. He, Sophie, would become her boyfriend, and they would be together for the long haul. They were a couple. They moved in together, so it's quite serious. And she had enrolled for her catering course, but really tragically, she wouldn't get to take her course. At the end of 2002, crikey, that's nearly 10 years ago, isn't it? Wait, 20 years ago. Oh my God. Okay. Crisis of life. I digress. At the end of 2002, Rachel and Mark would buy 2 kittens. Now, their names are absolutely, well, one of them gets me. It's so cute. And like, where did they think of it? But I love it. One was called Batman. Cute. The other one was called Speedy Tomato. Okay, that is just brilliant. I love that. I mean, it's not a dog, so it's not like she's going to be out on a walk being like, Speedy Tomato. No, but it's still brilliant. Speedy Tomato. Come on. Rachel treated the kittens like they were her babies. They were her fur babies, and she treated them like that. And she loved them. She adored them. And she didn't want to leave them alone because they were really, really still quite young. And it's not the best idea to leave new baby animals alone for long periods of time. As it was coming up to Christmas time, and they had these new kittens, Mark and Rachel, they had a conversation and they decided to split the care. So they lived together, but they were young, and at Christmas they would normally kind of separate. So Rachel would go to her parents' house and have Christmas and things there, and Mark would go and visit his parents. So they both wanted to spend time with their families at Christmas. So they kind of juggled it around so that one of them would always be at the flat with the kittens while they were little babies. New Year's Eve ended up being Rachel's night to be out. So she arranged to go out with her brother John. So he was the brother that's just 6 years older than her. And this is cute. I think that's nice, going out with your brother on New Year's Eve. So that was their plan. And Mark it was his duty to stay at home and look after the kittens. So that's what they had agreed. So on the 31st of December 2002, Rachel and John, they head out, they're off to the pub, having a good night. And they do have a good night. They meet up with friends, they hang out, they drink, they party, and then they head home at about 1 a.m. They are going back to their parents' house. So rather than go their separate ways, they've agreed that Rachel's just going to stay at home with her parents that night. And they get home at 1:20 a.m, about 1:20 a.m. Just to let you know, I hate New Year's Eve. It just really upsets me. It's a sad, I don't know why. I honestly don't know why. Nothing happened in my past. There's no, weirdness. I just find it really miserable and depressing. I'm not happy. Everyone else is like, woo, woo, having a party, happy New Year. I just find it, I hate it. And it's even worse if I'm actually awake at midnight and everyone's doing Happy New Year and hugging and kissing. I just feel so depressed. And no, not for me. So on New Year, and it's not bar humbug, not at all. I'm happy for people. I understand it, but I don't know why. It just really upsets me. New beginning, saying goodbye to another year. I don't know. Maybe it's that, but it just fills me, or even talking about it fills me with dread. And it's just a normal evening, and then we just go to bed. We used to try and watch the Hootenanny thing, Jules Holland Hootenanny, with a nice meal and a bottle of wine, and this is our little way of celebrating. Don't even do that now. Just American Office will do me, and maybe a gin, maybe not, a cup of tea, and go to bed. That is at 10, 10:30. That'll be me fabulously happy. And then I'll just wake up the next day and just pretend that it didn't happen. Pretend it's the 2nd. That would be good, actually. Yeah, I'll do that. I digressed again, I'm sorry. So at about 1:20 a.m, Sophie, they arrive home, Rachel and her brother John, and to her parents' house. And John goes straight up to bed. He's had a few, so he's off to bed. Rachel hadn't had as much to drink, probably still a fair bit, but she wasn't rolling around pissed. So she stayed up with her mum. So her mum was up, and at that point I think her dad was up as well, but he went up to bed shortly after. So it ended up just being Rachel and her mum, and they had a good old natter, good old catch up before they decided that they were going to go to bed. When it was time for bedtime, Rachel decided to give Mark a ring and say, Happy New Year, love you, all that sort of stuff. Just catch up with him and wish him a Happy New Year. And when she rang Mark, now this would do my head in two. This would be the sort of thing that Paul might have done years ago. When she rang him, she could hear noise in the background, and basically he was out. He wasn't at the flat. He had gone out. So he was neglecting his kitten care duties. Naughty. Rachel was gutted about this. She was really pissed off because they'd made this whole plan. This is what annoys me. This would annoy me. It's just inconsiderate because they had this whole plan, and I've just realised something awful and tragic. But anyway, moving on. They had this plan, and now she doesn't want the kittens to be left overnight while they're so tiny. So she goes upstairs, she changes out of whatever she was wearing, out of her outfit, puts on trainers, whatever, comfy clothes, and she decides that she's going to go back to the flat. She doesn't live far from her mum and dad, so it's not miles and miles away. It's a walkable distance. What the hell are you? Did you see that? I don't know if the camera would have caught that, but there's some sort of flying insect. Fab. Rachel's mum, Wanda, she heard this going on and she was really, really not happy. She was so not happy with Rachel walking at this time of night. So it's got to be after 2 a.m. or around 2 a.m. So she actually follows Rachel out into the street, into the road, and she's begging Rachel not to walk home. And this is just sad, but she's begging her, that was a big one as well, not to walk home alone at this time of night. Nobody in the house was able to drive Rachel home either, because it's New Year's Eve, everybody had had a drink, everyone was drunk, pissed, so, or definitely over the limit, so that was really annoying. Had this been any other night, there would have been an adult in the house or somebody in the house that could have driven her home. While they were having this discussion out in the road, a stranger was walking by, like a man, and Rachel's mum was going to ask him if he would walk Rachel home. She was like, I'm out of options here. Like, what can I do? Like, maybe I'll ask him if he can walk Rachel home. But in the end, she didn't actually do that. Rachel insisted that she would be okay. It's not far. Don't worry. I'll be okay. I'll go straight home. And as soon as I get there, I will ring you. So they had this conversation. Rachel she lived less than a mile away from Wanda and Ray, her mum and dad, and you guessed it, she didn't make it home. After half an hour of Rachel leaving, Wanda rang Rachel's mobile. So she was like, okay, she should be home by now. So she rang the mobile, no answer. Then she started to ring Rachel's home phone at the flat, and that she didn't answer that either. So she just kept on ringing. She rang her mobile, she rang the flat, she rang her mobile. She just kept on for hours. Wanda was beside herself with worry, as you can imagine, and she had begged her daughter not to walk home that night. In the end, in her mind, Wanda thought maybe Rachel, she was really cross about the whole thing. Maybe she had gone to the party where Mark was to confront him or to give him a telling off, like, why the hell have you come to the party? Why aren't you looking after the kittens? It might have been something that she would have done, and that she was there at the party. Maybe she'd gone there, gone to talk to him and thought, oh, okay, I'll have a drink or whatever and we'll go home soon. That's what Wanda was hoping had happened. At about 4:30 a.m, Wanda, she went to bed. She went to sleep. She just thought, that's got to be what's happened here. And she didn't wake up until 10 a.m. the next morning. When she woke up, she went downstairs and she told the family about what had happened. So this is when it was all action stations. Nobody had heard from Rachel, even at this point at 10. So everybody was like, okay, really worried now. And everybody started to try and ring Rachel, the flat, her mobile. Again, they were just, all of them trying to get hold of her. Eventually, when they rang the home phone one time, Mark picked up. So Mark actually picked up and they were like, oh my God, is Rachel there? And this is when it's just your worst nightmare as a parent, because no, she was not. Mark was really confused. He was like, what are you all talking about? She stayed at your house. And that's, as far as he knew, that was exactly what was going on. There was no question. He just thought, well, that's where she is. She's staying at her mum's. He didn't know that she'd left to go home to look after the kittens. On the phone, Mark would tell them, she hasn't even been back, because the flat is exactly how he had left it when he went out. The kittens had not been fed, and she would definitely have done that if she had been home. And the bed wasn't slept in. He'd come home and the bed was completely, she hadn't been there, basically. This is when Rachel's parents reported her missing to the police, and the case moved really quickly because it was quickly determined, I said it properly, quickly, it was determined that she was really an unlikely candidate for running away. She was happy, she had a partner, she had kittens, she loved her life, and the story that her mum told, she was going home to tend to the kittens and she just didn't make it. So yeah, they moved quick and fast. The police went to Rachel's flat to have a look around, and over 40 officers were assigned to her case early on. They didn't hang about. They interviewed everybody that knew Rachel. Her closest friends and family first, obviously, but just, yeah, they were like, yep, get them in, interview them. They interviewed everyone that she knew. Wanda was the crucial witness because she was the last person to see Rachel before she'd gone missing. And in their questioning and their interview, she told them about this passerby. So the stranger, the man, that she nearly asked to walk Rachel home. So he quickly became somebody that they were like, yeah, we need to speak to this guy, because she left minutes after that. So he was a crucial person of interest. No, witness. Let's say witness. Well, possibly. They don't know if he'd seen anything, but they wanted to know. They wanted to know who he was, if he'd seen anything. Marky boy. He was suspect number one. Boyfriend. They'd had an argument because she wasn't happy about the kittens. So yeah, Mark was like up there, top of the list. And also, it was a bit concerning because Mark didn't seem to be all that upset in the interviews. So he didn't seem as sad or worried or whatever as they thought he should be when they were interviewing him when she was missing. So that was kind of raising a red flag for them. However, he had a really strong alibi because, get this, he was with many witnesses, he was at that New Year's Eve party until 7 a.m. What? I mean, no. That is just dangerous for your body. That is. He had an alibi, and Rachel's entire family were like, no, stranger things have happened, but they were saying there is no way that he did anything to Rachel. She was the love of his life. He adored her, and no, not Mark. The case started to go really frustratingly cold. There were no witnesses. Nobody knew. It's like she just vanished. And Mark was ruled out. He was ruled out of it. He had such a strong alibi. And yeah, just annoying. There was just no clues. And confirming pretty much that she had not run away was the fact that she hadn't used her bank card, she hadn't used her mobile phone, and that's really worrying. When that happens, it's like, because who doesn't use their mobile phone? The police started to look at CCTV. They were like, well, let's just look at everything we can. So public and private. So they made this appeal for anyone that had CCTV within like a 6-mile radius of where she'd gone missing to come forward so that they could have a look at it. They ended up with a piece of CCTV footage from a certain place, and it showed Rachel walking past a shop in the direction of her flat, and really not far from her flat. I think it was 250 metres. I will double check that in a minute, but not far. Then a really intensive search began. So they used sniffer dogs in this area where they thought she'd gone missing, or they knew she'd gone missing. They dragged all the rivers and stuff locally. That's just horrible, isn't it? And they also had the helicopter out. Sorry, my brain just farted. It just died then for a minute. This intensive search was underway, and it was just bringing up nothing. Again, really frustrating. Just nothing. But then 2 weeks after the search began, when they were dragging a local canal, they found a woman's trainer that was then determined to belong to Rachel, and they found inside a black bin bag a handbag, and inside that handbag was a mobile phone and lots of bits and bobs that you would normally find in a woman's handbag, and then a passport, and this passport belonged to Rachel. So this was Rachel's handbag. So this is like, okay, there's been foul play, because she didn't put her own handbag in a black sack and throw it in the river, did she? And a shoe? No. At this point, they send dive teams into the canal to search for Rachel's body, because they think it's a pretty sure thing. But no, her body is not in the canal. It's getting weird. The police then did a reconstruction. Now, there was a show. Is it Crime Watch? I used to watch it as a young teenager. That's just weird, isn't it? well, the beginning of my interest in true crime. So you'd watch this thing and they would do reconstructions of the crime. Not too awful and graphic. I was quite young and my parents did let me watch it. But yeah, so, these were the last known movements of such and such. And they did this with Rachel's case. So they always get someone that looks similar to the person that's gone missing. And they walk the exact route that person did, if they've determined what it was. Now, this actually brought forward some eyewitnesses. However, it's good and bad because it was New Year's Eve that night. So these people, all of them that had come forward with tips or, oh yeah, we saw, they were all pissed off of their pickle on New Year's Eve. So that makes these people really not credible because who knows what they really saw or was it her, and it was a while previous to this, so it wasn't, they couldn't really go on these eyewitnesses, which is annoying. But who's going to be out at that time if they're not off their nut? I don't know. But their little reconstruction, what it did do is it prompted a local school, someone saw the appeal and they were like, oh, well, we've got a CCTV. So it brought forward people to give more CCTV footage because they knew the route. So like, oh, we're on that route. So they gave the police, this school, their footage. And on that footage, it's chilling. It shows a figure. It's grainy as hell. What? It's never like, Jason Bourne and things like that, when there's CCTV and they're like, zoom in and they can see every feature on that person's face. No. This is just I don't know, it's like a potato just walking across. You can't tell. And I can't tell. I watched the footage and how they know it's a woman first, I don't know. But a figure walks past first and they believe that figure to be a woman. So they think it was Rachel. And then not far behind her, another figure, which they believe is a man, following Rachel. So this is not looking great, is it? This footage is 150 metres away. So where it's filmed, that school, is only 150 metres away from Rachel's flat. So she was so close to home. So in that 150 metres, they've narrowed it right down now. So something happened to Rachel in that space, in that 150 metres. On the 28th of January in 2003, so 28 days after Rachel's gone missing, I feel like this is extreme, I guess. But I'm glad they did it, but it feels extreme. They decided to search every house in that area. I know it's not a huge area, but still, it was over 300 houses. And they used 100 police officers. So that's a lot of money for this search. How it worked is they split the officers into little teams. So they had 2 police officers and a search specialist. So somebody that specialises in searching. I need someone like that daily for my keys. Literally, I have lost 2 sets of house keys in the last week. The house, we live in a small house and it's not all that untidy. Where are they? Answers on a postcard, please. Really annoying me. On the same day that they began their search, the head of the investigation, Paul Davidson, he received a phone call. Now, that is what you want. You don't want this dragging on forever because it's a lot of money, like I said, and a lot of resources. So they were probably fingers crossed, we find something. And they did. This particular team had been searching somewhere called Nash Court and they arrived at flat number 19. This was the home of a 22-year-old man called Michael Little and he was at home with a friend called Mark Fuller. Now, like I said, they had a search specialist. So these people, these officers, they weren't just poking their nose in. No, they were properly looking, opening things, rifling through nook and crannies, lofts. They were outbuildings. They were looking at everything. They were searching everywhere. And that's what they did here in this flat. And they noticed that it was a mess. And from the sounds of it, just an unpleasant living situation. But but they found nothing. They found nothing suspicious. And when they were leaving, they realised that they needed to check the bin cupboard. So there's a cupboard in flats sometimes for each flat where you store your rubbish in your bin. This particular bin cupboard, or the bin cupboards in that block of flats, were 3 foot high and lockable. So they had a lockable door. So you pop your rubbish in, lock the door, get it out when it's time for the bin men. They tried to open the door, but it was locked. So they asked Michael for the key, and he had a shady, I think it's at my mum's house. Why would it be there? Shush. And they started to get a bit prickly, and they were like, we cannot leave until we've looked in your bin cupboard, mate. And all of a sudden, Michael found the bin cupboard key, miraculously. Oh, yeah, here it is. This bin cupboard was not just a couple of bin bags. No, that would be far too easy. And it was rank. It smelled awful, and it was chocker. It was really full. So he had things like carpet scraps, black bags, just piles of rubbish and cardboard, and just loads of stuff like that. So they had to clear it. They had to be able to make sure that they looked properly in this bin cupboard. And so they set to work. What a horrible job. As they were clearing this cupboard, they were set to work, and all of a sudden, one of the officers just stopped completely, just froze. And the other officer realised that, weird, what's going on? So he went over, he was like, you okay? What's the matter? And they looked down, and poking out from underneath all of this rubbish was a human leg. The pair of them carefully began removing more and more rubbish, and eventually they cleared the cubby hole, or the bin cupboard, and they found the body of Rachel Moran. Now, she was over 6 foot, and this cupboard thing was 3 foot tall, and yeah, she was in the fetal position, so she was sort of curled up and she was wrapped in a duvet. Of course, they arrested Michael Little and his friend Mark Fuller because they were both there. So they called for backup. They called for more officers to come to this address. Mark Fuller, the friend, Michael's friend, he was really confused, and the police officers thought genuinely so. He just was not understanding this situation. Why are you arresting me? What do you mean a body? And they thought that, okay, it seemed like this guy had no idea what they were talking about. Now, Mark Fuller would be taken to the police station first, so they were handcuffed. He was handcuffed and put in a car, so these officers had gone and taken him. So while they were waiting for another car to arrive, the police officer, he was called PC Dennison, he ended up alone in the flat with Michael Little. He's handcuffed, Michael's handcuffed. They're alone together. And then, while they're waiting for this car to come and take, a police car, to come and take them in, Michael starts to confess. I'm going to read what he said. Okay, here we go. Eyes adjusting. I'm so glad you found her. I've wanted to tell someone for ages. It's such a weight off my chest. I saw the police stuff on the news and I hoped they would come here. I've not told anybody else. Nobody knows. I can't be a normal person doing this. I must be evil or something. I saw her that night walking alone, so I went over and spoke to her. She came back here for a drink. Doubt it. And we chatted for a while, but ended up arguing. I think I walked out of the room or something, and then when I came back she had gone to the kitchen and was stood at the side with her back to me. When I went near her, she turned around and I saw a small knife in her hand. Please. She slashed out at me and cut my arm, so I grabbed a knife and just stabbed her. Piece of... And what a liar. Michael was taken into the station after confessing all, and the forensic team, they arrived at the flat, and Rachel's family were then told this tragic news. At the police station, being questioned again, Michael would stick to his story of self-defence. He was like, obviously, he was going to stick with that and run with that one. What's the deal with Michael Little? He was one of 6 siblings, and he was a naughty boy. Really naughty, very unmanageable, and he was excluded from loads of schools. He was really naughty, unmanageable boy. Couldn't find much about his home situation or his home life. There's normally a reason why children behave this way, but I couldn't find that. But he left school with no qualifications. One school, he'd been expelled from a few, and he then just faded really into sort of nothingness. He struggled to keep a job. Like I said, he had no qualifications. He didn't have a good work ethic. He didn't stick anything out, and he moved into the flat where Rachel was found not long, literally like months before he murdered Rachel, which is awful. And he was unemployed, so he lived in that flat, probably on benefits. I'm imagining if he has no job, possibly a council flat. I don't know. I don't know that information, but probably. And he would spend his days drinking and smoking and watching pornography. He did have a couple of friends, but those friends, when they were interviewed, would say that he was like a liar, like a compulsive liar. So do you blame him? His life is not a good one, is it? And he would make up stories and tell tales. One of those tales would be that he was dating people that he wasn't. So he would tell his friends, like, oh, I've got a girlfriend, and she's this or she's that. But he never was. They knew that. They just knew that he was lying all of the time. And not long before Rachel's murder, he had told friends that he was dating a 6 foot or over 6 foot blonde model. Now, this was kind of creepy and uncanny because Rachel was blonde and she was over 6 foot and she was very pretty. So the police wondered whether he had this infatuation with Rachel. They didn't live far from each other. They lived really close to each other. Maybe he'd seen her before and he was almost having a fantasy relationship with Rachel. And that's really dangerous, isn't it? So that's kind of what they thought had happened. On the night of New Year's Eve, Michael had gone to a party with some of his friends, and there was a girl that he fancied. He liked her a lot, and she ended up at that party going off with one of his friends. And this really pissed him off. He was like, well, I like her. And she went off with a friend. Like, that sucks. And then he headed off to another party. So he left that party, that's actually a party now, and went to a new one. And he left that party in the early hours of the morning. And this is where it gets it's not even spicy, I don't even know what it is. But dark, cringy, I don't know. You decide what this is. Tragic? I don't know. But they believe that the stranger that overheard Rachel and her mum talking, the stranger that Rachel's mum almost asked to walk Rachel home, they believe that was fricking Michael Little. What are you going to do? That's terrifying. They went back and they looked over the CCTV footage to have a go and just think, what's gone on there then? And in that footage, Rachel had walked past that shop, hadn't she, in the first sort of CCTV footage. That's hard to say when you've had nearly a whole gin. And so they rewound it and they looked back, and 3 minutes before Rachel walks past the shop, a man walks past the shop. So this man could possibly be Michael Little, again, grainy as hell. So he was in front of Rachel, so that seems bizarre. And then in the second lot of CCTV footage at the school, the same looking figure is behind Rachel, right? So this would suggest that whoever he was, Michael Little, he had walked past the shop. He'd been ahead of Rachel. And then at some point, the slimy git had hidden. And then when Rachel had walked past, he had then started to follow her. So this would suggest a level of premeditation, would it not? He thought, I'm going to hang back and then I'm going to follow her. Rachel's autopsy showed that she had been stabbed 27 times in her head, neck and back area. with so much force that some of the wounds had gone the entire way through her body. And this is where it gets me. This is where I get angry now, because they noted that Rachel's body, she had no defensive wounds. She had no defensive wounds. That piece of shit ambushed her from behind and attacked her. I mean, how else can you describe that? She would have tried to defend herself if she could. Don't like this fella. The police had a theory, and their strongest theory was, in fact, that Michael had probably approached Rachel, tried to chat her up, or I don't know, something like that. Now, if this was a big fantasy of his, taking a second rejection that night because the girl that he fancied had already gone off with a friend, and now he's finally talking to Rachel, and the chances are that she would have rebuffed any advances. Also, probably been a bit freaked out and scared. So that wouldn't be the response that he was after. They believe that when he was close to his flat, he would have attacked Rachel or grabbed Rachel and silenced her and dragged her into his property. There was mud on the back of her legs, and they believe that's why they believe that happened, that he had dragged her from outside into his flat. You know what I mean? Property, flat. I couldn't pick a word. They also believe that Rachel was then murdered in the hallway. So before they'd even gone any further, there were traces of blood found in the hall. So they think that once he had her inside of the flat, he then attacked her, leaving no time for her to react or for her to defend herself. He had tried to clean up, but the forensics, they found all of these traces, and they then found that they were a match to Rachel in the hall. The autopsy also showed that Michael had sex with Rachel, but they do believe that this was after he had murdered her, because they really do strongly believe that he'd murdered her in the hallway when they'd first got in. So they think that it was after Rachel was murdered. As always, it's never straightforward, is it? So despite confessing, he was charged with murder on the 31st of January in 2003, and when it came to it, he pled not guilty, even though he had confessed. This is common though, isn't it? We shouldn't be surprised. The trial would begin in October of 2003, and again, this seems to happen frequently recently, but his defence said that he didn't kill Rachel, didn't kill her, but he did have sex with her. What is it with this? Okay. Michael said that it wasn't him that murdered Rachel. They'd had sex that night, but he didn't murder. It was Mark Fuller. Hold on to your hats, because this is just okay. This is something else, right? This is his story. He says that Rachel went to the flat to buy drugs from Mark Fuller, who was there. When Michael came home from his party, he found Rachel at the flat with Mark buying drugs, and then they had a drink, and they started just chatting and having a drink together. And then Michael decided that he was going to go to bed, and he went to his room, and Rachel followed him in. When she entered the room, she asked Michael if he found her good looking. And he said that he found her extremely gorgeous, and then they had consensual sex. What the hell? This must have just been torturous to listen to for her poor parents, because, yeah, really? Mark entered the bedroom, found them having sex, and was furious because he wanted to have sex with Rachel, and he couldn't believe that this was happening and that Michael was with Rachel and it wasn't him. And so he grabbed a knife and he started stabbing, and he stabbed Rachel to death in front of Michael. He then threatened Michael and said, if you say anything or tell anyone, I will kill you and your entire family. So he was scared. Michael, what happened to your self-defense story? That was a lie. That was just made up. Okay. Come on. All evidence pointed to Michael. Mark had nothing to do with this. The poor guy. And Michael had confessed twice. He had confessed twice. On the 30th of October 2003, Michael Little was found guilty of murder and he was given a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years. Good. And that's all I have on this case. It is another really sort of kind of stuff of nightmares, because she was just walking home, trying to look after her kittens. That's awful. Yeah. And it just seems really... It is stuff of nightmares. Like, it's just, you just dread. And also the thing that I remembered earlier that was like, oh God, that's sad. Like her boyfriend Mark, that loved her and adored her so much, how the hell must he feel? Because he wasn't even meant to go out that night. If he hadn't have gone out that night, that's awful. That is awful. It's not his fault at all. I'm not saying that, but can you imagine living with that, knowing that? Just so sad. And it's annoying because it's not his fault. These things should not happen. But that must be something horrible to live with. The Moran family also, there's kind of more tragedy to this tale, because one of Rachel's older sisters, called Vanda, she was in ill health. She died later on after Rachel's murder, and her parents, so Ray and Wanda, just say that she neglected her health so much. She had epilepsy. Sorry, I haven't written it in my note. I'm sure it said it was epilepsy. She had a health condition, and then she was exposed to chickenpox, and there was lots of health complications. But basically, her parents said that they just felt like after Rachel's murder, Vanda just went into a decline, and she stopped taking care of herself, stopped thinking about herself, and this led to her demise. So they believe that Michael Little was actually responsible for her death as well. And Vanda ended up being buried next to Rachel. So I'm glad that they're together. They're buried together. Thank you so much for joining me today for another true crime story. Hope you can join me next week for a tankard of gin, getting creative now, or whatever vessel you choose. Thank you for your questions. Again, apologies for the late video. I really try not to, because I don't want to get into a sort of spiral of being late with stuff. But when it's assignment week, and it's thick and fast this year, I have more assignments this year. Year 2 is cheers, thanks. Just make it even trickier. So, yeah, I've done my best. And yeah, so I asked for questions on a little video that I posted today. So I wanted to just put it out there. I don't have a community tab yet, so I can't talk to you guys and leave little messages if something like this happens and it's going to be late. So I did a little video. I've done it before. And yeah, I suddenly thought, oh yeah, I said about doing a chit chat vid. So I will maintain my weekly true crime because I love it, but I will also do an extra video where I come up here, have a gin, and I'm going to answer all of your questions. And there are some amazing questions so far. I'm loving it, really loving it. I was reading through just like, oh my gosh, some of them I'm going to have to think about. I'm like, I don't know the answer to that question. Tricky. So it will be interesting. And I'm looking forward to it. And I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to chat and answer all of your questions. Yeah, some really good ones. Well done. I'm not even going to say when I'm going to do that or what. When the mood takes me soon, I will do that video and get that out. And it will probably, there's no research to do for that one other than just a little bit of thinking, because there were some questions that I was like, I don't know the answer to that. But yeah, so that will be coming soon. When shall I release that? On a Wednesday? Should I space it out like a Monday and a Friday? So true crime on my Friday. What? True crime on the Friday. A little sneaky one on the Monday. I don't know. That's exciting. I wanted to make sure I'm not just replacing a true crime video because some of you won't give a shit. about the answers to my questions, and you're just here for the story. So I didn't want to replace it. I'm going to love and leave you because these fireworks are getting really hot and heavy, and I would like to see them. They probably look beautiful, and the boys are probably watching out of the window. Actually, I might do the same because then it's nice and cosy, but we can see all the pretties. Right, okay. If I had thought about this, I should have done like a bonfire night themed, like Guy Fawkes. I could have told the story of Guy Fawkes, all of that business. I could have done a bonfire sort of themed. You live and learn. Stop it. Right, I love you all. Have a beautiful weekend, beautiful Sunday, and I will see you next week for another true crime story. Bye.